Nick Fuentes has more weekly listeners than there are Jews on planet Earth. There are about 15 million Jews, and Nick gets way more than 15 million clicks and streams per week. We can say these are individuals with a dangerous set of priorities, and it's a damning indictment on our political system that they have such a degree of influence. And for us to cede that territory, I think is really short-sighted.
Shabbos Kestenbaum, an American Jewish activist and political commentator. Today, speaking about the weaponization of media narratives, conspiracy culture, Western identity, the future of Israel, and more.
Everything wrong with American society, it all traces back to one political group, and that, of course, is the Israel lobby. So anytime they talk about the Israel lobby, just know they are lying to you and they think you are dumb. All they care about is the boogeyman, is Israel, because it drives clicks. If you believe that Jews control the media, that Jews control politics, that the Jews control Hollywood, those things are not true. What's a way more effective argument is...
On another episode of the Soothing Semantics podcast, I am your host, Rafi Harel, and of course, make sure to smash the like button, leave your comments, subscribe to the channel for all of your real estate needs in South Florida. You know where to find me. This week, we have Shabbos Kestenbaum in the building, in the Zoom building. I had the pleasure of meeting Shabbos at the CAM Summit, the Combat Antisemitism Movement Summit. I have seen him kick ass in debates for quite some time now. Shabbos, you're doing a kick-ass job, man. I just saw you mop the floor with Anna Kasparian. I just did a reaction video on my channel. I really, really enjoyed it, man. So, kol hakavod to you.
I appreciate that, and thank you very much for having me today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're gonna get into the politics of around Thomas Massie and everything going on there, because that's actually something I wanted to start with. What I really like that you said to Anna was, I'm against public funding when it comes to voting across the board. So I don't want to single Israel out, but let's be fair and let's cover every aspect of politics and voting. So just give us, if you can, for whoever didn't watch the debate that you had with Anna, what were your major talking points?
Sure. Well, I think you summarized it quite nicely, which is to say that post 2010, which was the United States Supreme Court's decision vis-a-vis Citizens United, we've seen a tsunami of money whereby the Supreme Court tied speech with money, meaning you can't really curtail a corporation's spending habits with an election. So you saw the onslaught of these PACs. And I'm against that onslaught of PACs. I think there's far too much money in the American political cycle. Barack Obama generated outrage in 2012 when he was the first president to outline in his campaign strategy the need to raise $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion. And flash forward about 15 years later, that's kind of the norm. If you're running for president of the United States, you're going to raise a minimum of $1 billion. Kamala Harris raised $1 billion in less than 100 days. We have seen that in House elections, even ones that aren't fairly competitive, it's costing $7, $8, $9, sometimes even $10 million just for a primary candidate, a primary incumbent with no real chance of defeat for getting reelected. The problem I have, and this is what you just said, and this is what I said during the debate, is when it comes to the far left and the far right, they don't really care about any of that. They just use that as a tool to propagate their narrative of everything wrong with our political discourse, everything wrong with our politics, everything wrong with American culture, everything wrong with American society. It all traces back to one and one only nefarious political group, and that, of course, is the Israel lobby. And there are a bunch of problems with this mentality, leaving aside the fact, of course, that AIPAC is not an Israeli lobby. You don't have to like AIPAC, you don't have to support AIPAC, but you do have to like and you do have to support the facts. And every single donor to AIPAC, by law, are American citizens. AIPAC is run by American citizens. You can see their president and board of directors online publicly. These are American citizens. So anytime they talk about the Israel lobby, just know they're lying to you and they think you are dumb. So that's problem number one. It's not the Israel lobby, it's Americans lobbying for Israel because they believe that the Israeli-American relationship is in the best interests of the American people. You don't have to agree with that narrative, but they're not Israeli. That's number one. Number two, AIPAC itself ranks 191st when it comes to lobbying spending. They don't actually spend that much when it comes to lobbying. Now, people are going to say, well, what about their PAC? And it's true. AIPAC does have a PAC, a political action committee, which is not dissimilar to a whole host of other PACs. Even when it comes to that, AIPAC is not even the top spender. The American Dentistry Association spent far more than AIPAC, but no one talks about any of those lobbying groups because no
NAR, by the way, National Association of Realtors spends a lot more money.
right. Yeah, the National Association of Realtors, the National Rifle Association, the Chamber of Commerce, they all spend way more than AIPAC, but no one actually cares about any of those talking points because all the talking points they actually care about is everything wrong with your life has to do with AIPAC. And that's essentially what I tried to argue, not just with Anna Kasparian, but what I've been trying to argue for the last 2, 3 years. So if you want to make campaign finance reform, I'm all for it. I believe there's too much money in politics. But none of those people, Anna Kasparian, Cenk Uygur, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, none of them actually care about that issue. All they care about is the boogeyman, is Israel, because it drives clicks, it drives engagements, it drives likes. And it's just a shame because when I say this, all the comments are just, shut up Jew or shut up Zionist. My name is Shabbos Kestenbaum. I wear the funny hat. Today I happen to be wearing a baseball cap, but normally it's a yarmulke. And so my message kind of falls on deaf ears. But I wish more Americans realized that they're just being lied to, that those in the podcastistan verse, they just think you are a dumb person and they're going to continue to lie to you so long as they make money off of it.
Right. No, it makes total sense. Do you see this shifting with let me bring this wonderful video of that, meaning that speech. I'm not going to pull the video up, but the speech you made at Aish, which Anna brought up to try to give you that got you moment. But like, it's so clear that you're being facetious, and she goes, well, you see here, he speaks one way to his minions and he speaks another way to the goyim. And it's like, no, he's simply saying, if you're going to keep blaming us for running everything, then fine, we run everything. Like, and she just ran with that. It's like, and I think that's an amazing strategy, by the way. I've been saying this for a long time on my show. We're always appeasing and saying, no, 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 we don't run anything. It's like, first of all, we do have a lot of influence in this country, and we damn well earned it. We fucking earned it. Okay. We work hard, we stick together, we take care of our own. Other people should follow suit instead of constantly pointing fingers. If you want to get together and create any sort of organizations, if you're jealous of us that we have Hatzalah, that we have Shomrim, that we have Misaskim, that we have all these organizations that we have, which are wonderful organizations, which often help non-Jews, mind you, create them too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, America is built off of meritocracy. So it's funny because when Anna Kasparian brought up that video, she had said there's something that you say Shabbos when you're in front of cameras, but when you're behind closed doors, you say something else, which is kind of funny because in that speech, there was a camera directly in front of me. I knew I was being recorded because there was a camera right there. In fact, I have posted similar videos publicly on my own Twitter where I say the exact same point, which is if you believe that Jews control the media, if you believe that Jews control politics, if you believe that the Jews control Hollywood, those things are not true. These are idiotic statements based on deluded conspiracy theories, which is the part that Anna didn't or deliberately did not hear. But if you believe it's true, then okay, do something about it instead of complaining in your echo chamber on Twitter, instead of living in your mom's basement and posting at 2 a.m. that the Jews are ruining your life. Elect sensible candidates to Congress. I go to Capitol Hill fairly often. I actually have made significant relationships with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. Where are the Groypers? You guys can do that. It's an open door. It's a free country. Go lobby your member of Congress. Oh, but they won't meet with us. Yeah, they probably won't meet with you because they think your ideas are terrible. So that says something more about your terrible ideas and less about the fact that the Jews control these industries. So again, I'm just so sick and tired of pretending that the woke right or the woke left are these like misunderstood victims. And really there's like something in their soul that speaks out and yearns for political liberation, for political emancipation. No, these people have terrible ideas. They have no way of getting their act together. And so rather than building, all they do is blame. And that is the point I was making. This is not like Anna getting me in a gotcha moment because I make that point publicly the entire time. If you think your life is being controlled by Jews, then engage in the political process. Go to Capitol Hill and lobby. Elect members of Congress. Pass or pressure for pieces of legislation. But the Groypers have literally not been able to elect a single member of Congress. They have not been able to enact a single piece of legislation. They don't have any political support. And rather than recognizing it's because their ideas are out of step with the American people, they just continue to dig themselves deeper into this pit of despair by saying, oh my God, the Jews just control everything.
Well, what do you think when you were having that debate? Well, it was on CNN, right? It was with you, Anna, and then that guy with the glasses. I don't know who he is.
Oh no, that was Al Arabia, which is sort of the emerging
Oh, Al Arabiya. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Of the
yeah.
Piers
Right.
Morgan show.
Yes, I'm okay. So that who's that guy with the glasses? I've never seen him before.
That's Robbie Suave, I believe is his last name. He works at Reason TV. He's more of a libertarian.
Like reasoned. Oh, reasoned. I'm familiar with Reasoned UK. Same thing. That's just
Uh,
the.
I don't know if that's the same organization, but if that's also a libertarian organization, then yes, free market capitalism, things like that.
Got it. Okay, maybe I have to look into it. So he was saying that the boomers in the US are staunch supporters of Trump. They're diehard Trump supporters, but the younger crew, the younger crowd, the Nick Fuentes age, even people in their 30s, I guess millennials, Gen Z, as they get older, he thinks that they might that tide might turn where, what do you think about? Do you think that's
Yeah, it's an argument that's quite literally rehashed every single political generation. There's this great saying. So I used to be on the left up until October 7th, and there's this great saying: if you're not a Democrat when you're younger, you don't have a heart. But if you're not a conservative when you're older, you don't have a brain. So as people get older, they tend to become more conservative anyway. So you can go back to the first Bush administration. People were saying the exact same thing, that the core of his support are these boomers. Well, the boomers are all dying, and these young people, they're way to the left. Again, people make these predictions every decade, every generation. It never really pans out because as those Gen Z or even millennials get older, they tend to drop more of their far left progressive ideologies. At the end of the day, those progressives, in the same way the woke right doesn't have political representation, those far left progressives, yeah, they have more political representation and more elected members of Congress than the Groypers, which is to say more than zero. But still, they could not run a national campaign. They can't really get national figures. They can get pockets of representation. So like Zohar Mamdani is a really good example in New York City. In theory, Nithya Raman, who's running with the Democratic Socialists of America in LA, she's their candidate. So she would be an example, though she probably is not going to win the mayoral race. But on a national level, I'm not really concerned about these trends simply because you can make that argument, as I said, in every single generation, and it never really pans out. The majority of the American people are pretty moderate when it comes to most issues. They're pretty sensitive and have a strict sense of justice, a strict sense of what's right and what's wrong. They don't really gravitate to any political extreme. And ironically, Donald Trump in 2024 was seen as a less extreme candidate in comparison to Kamala Harris.
interesting? Well, what would you say to the Jews that don't become conservative, right? There's a large percentage of Jews in, say, New York who they die liberals,
Yeah, I
So like, how
mean,
do you make
I'll make sort of an unfair generalization, and then I'll try to be more specific, which is to say
that?
that if you look at those same polls and opinion surveys, and New York is a great example, if you're a Jew living in New York and you're tied to a Jewish community, meaning you go to synagogue at least once a week, you have a kid or a grandkid in a Jewish day school, you're affiliated with some type of organizational structure pertaining to Jewish life. The odds of you supporting Zohar Mamdani are virtually non-existent. I mean, the Orthodox community, this is not really a religious statement, but it's a statement on sociology. The Orthodox community in New York, which is going to synagogue more than once a week, they're going to synagogue every day. And they don't have just one kid or grandkid in Jewish day school. They have all their kids in Jewish day school. And they don't go to support Israel after October 7th. They wave Israeli flags, the whole year round. So the Orthodox community overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump. They overwhelmingly, I'm not going to say supported Andrew Cuomo because they didn't exactly support Andrew Cuomo. They just really didn't like Zohar Mamdani.
Right.
Whereas if you are incidentally a Jewish person, meaning your Judaism is lox and bagels at Zabar's once a year on Yom Kippur, and Judaism doesn't really mean much to you other than using it to say, well, I'm incidentally Jewish, and even though I have no stake in the community, nevertheless, I will use my identity to propagate causes like Hamas, then yeah, you're probably going to support leftist candidates like Zohar Mamdani. But as I said, when it comes to people who are actually engaged in Jewish communal life, the odds of you doing that are very, very small. And then a broader point I would make, which is not necessarily what you were describing, but it's just good for people to hear because when I go on shows like Al Arabi or Piers Morgan, they'll say, well, 33% of New York Jews voted for Zohar Mamdani, or they'll say, 60% of American Jews voted for Kamala Harris. And I'll just make a general point, which is to say you can look at the Hebrew Bible, and only 20% of the Jews left bondage in Egypt. We have what's called the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, and these are individuals who presented themselves as part of the people, but nevertheless advocated for policies and values that were antithetical to our belief system. You can look at Jewish history, whether it was the Yavsektia under the Soviet era, whether it was individuals like Stella Goldenschlag who ratted out her own parents to the Nazis. Unfortunately, Jews do really bad things. So I'm not convinced of this argument that, well, just because a Jewish person is doing it, therefore it can't be anti-Semitic. In fact, I once did a debate with Peter Beinart. I've actually done a couple of debates with Peter Beinart. And at one point, Piers Morgan tried to press me because, again, he's in it for the clicks and likes. And he says, Shabbos, so are you saying Peter Beinart's an anti-Semite? And I said, Piers, I don't care if he's an anti-Semite. I don't think about it. It doesn't affect me. All I care about is that the things he's advocating for would result in wildly destructive things for my people. You want to call that anti-Semitic? Okay. You don't want to call that anti-Semitic? Okay. I don't really care. The labeling doesn't help.
That's a great answer. That's such a good answer, man.
Thanks.
But
what does help?
He loves doing. Piers doesn't give a really. Piers doesn't give a shit about any of this. It's all entertainment for him. And when he tries to get you, he's all about the got you moments. And he tries to get you by pulling the anti-Semite. Do you think it's anti-Semitism, Mr. Kestenbaum? And you're like, and you beautifully brush that aside and say, stupid policy, don't like it, not good for my people. I don't care what is actually, it's.
Yeah, and again, I also don't care if the person propagating for that policy is Jewish or not. It means absolutely nothing to me. And I think that's probably a broader point that the American Jewish community should probably take to heart, because the label anti-Semitism, rightly or wrongly, means almost nothing in American political discourse today, especially within the realm of social media. Stop Anti-Semitism is an American NGO, and I broadly support them. I think they do really good stuff. But one of the things that I find they do, which is super unhelpful, is every year they have like a top 10 anti-Semites, and then everyone can vote. I'm like, who's the number one anti-Semite of the year? And this last year they had like Miss Rachel. They had people that, look, do I agree with the things they do? No, but to call them an anti-Semite, whether that's a fair label or not, it just hurts the credibility of the NGO. I think what would be more helpful is say, hey, Miss Rachel was inviting a Gazan journalist who like praised Hamas on her platform. That would be a way more effective argument than just saying, hey, this like kids entertainer that most Americans have no idea is even involved with foreign policy. Hey, she had this like really controversial guest, and you should be aware, if your kids are watching, the types of people that she supports. I think that's just a way more effective argument. So what happened was you had people like Tucker Carlson or Dan Bilzerian or Jake Shields, and they would try to outcompete each other on Twitter, like, I want to be anti-Semite of the year. No, I want to be anti-Semite of the year. And they would kind of strategize, like, well, I denied the Holocaust. What more do I need to do? Well, I believe Israel committed 9/11. So what more do I need to do to win anti-Semite of the year? So I think the accusation has really become muddied, again, rightly or wrongly, whether that was our own doing or not. I don't really know. But as I said, I don't really care. So when Jake Shields, and this is true, he challenged me to debate him twice as to whether Jews orchestrated 9/11. And interestingly enough, both times I've accepted, and then he backed out. And he wants me to call him an anti-Semite. But I'm not going to do that, because what's a way more effective argument is, Jake Shields, I don't think you're necessarily an anti-Semite, but I do think you're mentally retarded, because you can look at two jumbo jets crashing into the World Trade Center and then somehow believe that it wasn't actually planes that took down the World Trade Center or something else. So I don't think you're an anti-Semite, you're just an idiot.
But that's what we have now. We have Americans who aren't fit to have these opinions, having these opinions. They're free to have the opinions, but just taking them seriously is kind of ridiculous.
Sure, but look, I mean, maybe Jake Shields isn't a good example of this, but Nick Fuentes probably is. Nick Fuentes has more weekly listeners than there are Jews on planet Earth. There are about 15 million Jews, and Nick gets way more than 15 million clicks and streams per week. So we can say these are individuals with a dangerous set of priorities, and it's a damning indictment on our political system that they have such a degree of influence that they do. But again, it's irrelevant because they have the influence. And for us to cede that territory, I think is really short-sighted. So I'll give you an example. In the American Jewish, I don't want to say influencer world, but in the American Jewish activist or political world, there are very few of us who will go on the Piers Morgan show anymore, because they'll say he's a Semite, he's just in it for the clicks, he's a sensationalist. And whether or not I think those things are true, I don't think he's an anti-Semite actually. But
Rabbi Shmuley Rabbi Shmuley really needs to stop going on that show.
Yeah, which by the way, one of the reasons I keep going on the Piers Morgan show is so Shmuley Boteach doesn't go on the Piers Morgan show. So I'm taking a big bullet for the Jewish people. So you are all welcome because I know if I'm not there, it'll be him. So you're welcome. But anyway,
Oh,
as I said, whether those accusations against Piers are true, and I don't think they are, but even if they are true, it's irrelevant because young people are getting their opinions and are formulating ideas based on what happens on that show. So for us to say, so we don't need to engage because he's just so terrible. Again, that's really short-sighted.
right. No, I think we have to be very outspoken. See, the mistake that we've made throughout history is we've always buckled, we've tried to hide, we've tried to make ourselves small. We have to be bold. If we want to live outside of Israel in the diaspora, the only way to do it and do it properly is to be very bold and to be very proud because we think that what we've done in the past is gonna work. It doesn't work. So I think we'll see how the next decade or two goes. I think one of the most important things for Americans, for young Americans to have a decent relationship with Israel and Jewish people overall, first and foremost, is for Israel to become militarily self-reliant. I think that's of fundamental importance. Now it's going to take time, won't necessarily be so easy, but I think it's very, very important. The U.S. benefits from what it's currently doing. Americans don't like it, but America knows good and well that having control over our ability to fight wars is in its interest.
Well,
Uh,
well, that's sort of the irony because Israel has far more to gain in not taking American foreign aid anymore, whereas the Americans, we have far more to lose. We like
Without a
having
doubt.
a strategic edge with the Israeli military and the Israeli government. They're the only country that is taking American military weapons and then testing it out in real
Testing it.
time. They were making modifications to our equipment. It's the only country that's doing it. So they actually make our products better, leaving aside the fact that we don't give free checks. In fact, the overwhelming majority of foreign aid that we give to Israel must be spent in the United States, and we actually make a profit. It's the only country we give foreign aid to that we actually make more money off of. But again, the political discourse is so dumbed down these days, and foreign aid has become so toxic, even though it only represents 0.8% of the federal budget. And of that 0.8%, Israel doesn't even get half of that 0.8%. But nevertheless, Bibi was the one who made this point earlier that Israel needs to be self-sufficient because thank God we have a great ally in the White House like President Trump. But can you imagine if it was Kamala Harris, or can you imagine if it was 4 more years of Joe Biden? So it's in
Yep.
Israel's interests. But as I said, I think we as the American people will actually be losing our military edge because Israel is
No
just
doubt.
a great ally in testing our weapons and making those modifications. And, they're a police force in the Middle East. The irony is when people say, well, I don't want American troops on the ground to be dying for Israel, neither does Israel, which is why Israel is the only country in the Middle East that's fighting its own wars. And they will be the first ones to tell the United States, as it has repeatedly, we don't want you to be involved. We want your support. And certainly, we want to continue this relationship, not just diplomatically, but also buying military equipment. But the greatest assurance we have as the American people against foreign entanglements is, in fact, the state of Israel. Because if the state of Israel was not keeping check these Islamic terrorist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, of course, the IRGC, can you imagine how much worse it would be for the Americans, especially because we wouldn't have the intelligence sharing that we currently have with the Israeli government?
Mhm. Well, it's also that China and Russia would step in to take over America's place in the Middle East. The reason why America, see, I have a buddy that I know that's always criticizing Israel and saying, "Oh, the funding, the funding." I said, "Homie, if you want to live in Big Daddy country, if you want to live in Big Papa land, the United States, understand that it's not Switzerland. It has to meddle in other affairs. It has to make sure that it is the number one superpower. And by doing that, it has to make sure that its competitors can't beat it." I said, let's call a spade, because other countries are trying to take the number one spot. So, like, that is such a major component that a lot of these Americans don't want to come to terms with. But I still think at the end of the day, we have to get off of the funding, man, because Israel could make an enormous amount of money manufacturing its own weapons and technology. Imagine they were able to make their own fighter jets instead of just modifying the F-35 into the Adir. If they can actually make their own jets, dude.
Yeah, I think another great irony is again, if America sees its role in being a beacon of democracy, liberty, and also military dominance, then the irony is you're going to have nefarious actors, Russia and China chief among them, who try to create a new hole in the market and try to pivot themselves to Israel, saying, hey, we also have great military equipment, and you should consider purchasing some of it off of us. And in the same way that I'm America first, so I believe America needs to do whatever is in our best interest, well, Israel's going to take the exact same approach and say, well, we're Israel first. And if America wants to scale back Western hegemony, then we have no choice but to consider what's best for the people of Israel. And if that means buying from these nefarious actors like Russia and China, so be it, because we have to care about our existential survival. So it's kind of a
That
great
is
irony, should we do this. But hopefully it doesn't happen because, as I said, I think Israel is, not I think, Israel has a higher GDP per capita than most European countries. Israel has more unicorns per capita than any country on planet Earth. Their military edge is almost second to none. So I don't think we would get to that point, but in theory, it is a likely scenario.
absolutely. No, dude, that was such an astute point. It's just very funny. So here's another question.
Yeah.
In terms of we're going to pivot slightly, but of course it's all related to Middle Eastern geopolitics. Are you a one-stater or a two-stater? I should know this. I should know this, but I don't.
Well, I'll give you my answer, but I have to explain it. Sure, I believe in a two-state, meaning in the same way that Jews have self-determination and freedom of movement and freedom of
Okay.
expression. In theory, that should absolutely be given to these people who now call themselves the Palestinians. So sure. The problem is, can you name three members in the Hamas government currently who believe in that as well? And the answer is no, you can't, because they don't believe in a two-state solution. They say this repeatedly. They believe in the eradication of the Jew from the river to the sea. And when they say the river to the sea, this might be news to my former classmates at the Ivy League, but they're referring to the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, which encompasses the entirety of this current state of Israel. So when you and I pontificate about a two-state solution, sure, I'm happy to concede that in theory it would be a great thing to have, but it's so unbelievably unrealistic. What are the borders? Who's its government? What's its territory? And no one has any answers to these things because the
Right.
people who the Gazans elected to represent them don't actually believe in the thing we're talking about. They are the ones who believe in a one state, but not a one state of multiculturalism and racial diversity and religious pluralism. No, they believe in a one state of Islamic Sharia law. They say this repeatedly. So I just think the I don't even know what it is, the grandiose self-esteem by which the West puts itself on to think that every other country or every other people thinks like them and they want a democracy, they just don't have the opportunity. They don't want a democracy. I mean, the lessons of Afghanistan, the lessons of Iraq have clearly shown us there are certain cultures that are not compatible with Western civilization. Like a significant amount of Muslim majority Middle Eastern countries do not want democracy. They don't want
No.
religious plurality. They don't want multiculturalism. They say this explicitly. And I think one of the problems the left have is they just fundamentally don't believe that Muslims or Palestinians are human beings. And every time Muslims or Palestinians say, hey, we are going to keep raping your women and burning down your homes and shooting your dogs and kidnapping your babies, and we'll do it a million more times, which are like actual things that Yahweh Sinwar and Mohammed Def keep saying, we in the West keep saying, oh, they don't mean that. No, no, no. They're just subjugated and they're yearning for democracy. The first people to tell you that Palestinians don't want democracy are Palestinians. They keep saying it at length, but we in the West just say, no, no. When they call for an intifada, they're referring to a peaceful overthrow of the Israeli rule in favor of liberation. No, they are not. They're explicitly and specifically referring to terrorism. Don't listen to me as the white dude in the West. Listen to Yahweh Sinwar. Listen to Mohammed Deif. Listen to Hassan Nasrallah. I mean, you can't because they're all dead now, but listen to Palestinians when they tell you what they actually want. So sure, do I believe in a two-state solution? Why not? I just don't think it's realistic in the next 100 years.
Okay. So I'll just say with incredible confidence, it will never happen. Well, I hope it never happens because it will never work. And that's because this is a religious war. And I really hope that more people start to understand that. I think people love to say it's a political war, it's a land dispute. It's Jerusalem. It's really the fight for Jerusalem because the Muslims know how important it is to us. It's uh, uh, um, replacement theology. They fundamentally do not believe that we should have the rights to it. We lost our covenant with God. It's just a bit it's biblical shit. Like we're not dealing with French people. We're dealing with deeply devout people who believe that once the Islamic conquest of Jerusalem happened, that's how it's got to be. Like this cannot be Jewish ruled land. Maybe they'll let us live in it to some degree. After they slaughter most of us, they'll let some of us stay and settle there under their rule. They're not sharing this with us. Like I don't know why this is so hard for people to understand. If we want to allow them to live in the land that we rule, there needs to be very clear instructions that you can live here if you acknowledge Israel's existence. You don't have to like it, but you better understand that this is the reality. And if you cause any issues, such as trying to kill us, we either get rid of you or we ship you somewhere else. Like these are things that have to be understood by both parties. And until we have that understanding, we're going to have more hostage taking, more negotiating, more returning 3,000 terrorists for one person. We're just going to continue to, we're going to defend our borders, be at the brink of winning the war. We'll be at the finish line of the war. America will pressure us to pull back. The enemy will get back on their feet, regroup, rearm, respawn. 3 years later, we're sending our 18-year-olds back into war again, just over and over and over and over and over and over. Never-ending conflict. That's my take. I can't see it any other way.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd push back on is the replacement theology isn't really with Islam. That's more Christianity. Islam's theological contention with the state of Israel is far deeper and historically has lasted for far longer, which is inherently we are the kuffar, we're the infidel. And the only way to create some type of understanding is either we pay their jizya tax when we were treated as second-class citizens under Muslim rule, or subjugation, whether that be through the sword, which it almost exclusively is, which is why when Jewish hostages were being released by Hamas, whether they were alive or in body bags, you had young Gazan boys chanting Khaybar Khaybar al-Yahud, hearkening back to the massacre in Medina of the Jewish communities through the sword of Islam. So I would agree with you, it's a religious war. Replacement theology is more of a contemporary American Christian perspective. And our greater theological problem in the Middle East is yes, it has to do with fundamentalist Islamic sects.
Well, I only said replacement theology. Maybe the technicality's off, but I say that because, from my understanding, Islam is effectively Judaism 3.0 in the sense that the Jews had the covenant, they lost it. The Christians, maybe they believe to some extent Jesus was a messianic figure or whatever, what have you. But then Muhammad came along and said, nah, everyone else screwed up. This is the last and final teaching. If you follow this, everything will work out in your favor. Because all three religions have their own version of what Messiah looks like, the final days. So we're all kind of contesting what the final days look like. And I think now that the Jews many of us have returned, the Muslims are shitting their pants going, wait a minute, we can't let it turn out the way that they want it to turn out because God said it has to turn out the way we believe it's supposed to turn out. Like
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, a lot of the Christian support pertaining to the contemporary state of Israel has to do with the fact that God makes a series of promises in the Hebrew Bible pertaining to the people of Israel and the land of Israel. Chief among them, perhaps, is that I will eventually bring you back. And so we Jews and many, many Christians, when they see the fact that after 2,500 years of an exile, Jews are actually returning to the exact same land that God promised them, they actually see that as a fulfillment of God's law, and that validates their theological beliefs on a whole host of other issues. This is kind of my contention with replacement theology, because replacement theology says, well, the Jews were just replaced primarily by the church. And that to me poses a series of problems, chief among them, if God breaks promises instead of fulfilling promises, then who's to say he's going to keep the promises he made with you guys? Because
that's a fantastic point.
If he can just pick and choose like who he wants to be truthful to, then you guys are screwed just as much as we're screwed. And so I actually know many Christians. This is, I would say, a mainstream approach within Christianity that say, my God does not forsake covenants, my God fulfills covenants. And the proof to that is he told these Jews 2,500 years ago, yes, you will be exiled and dispersed and oppressed, but nevertheless, you will still be a people and a people that I will remember and return to the land. And that is literally what has happened in the last 80 years. How can you not say, how can you look at your Bible and then not say that God is clearly someone who keeps his word? And if he keeps his word with that thing, with the Jew stuff, then how much more so is he going to keep his word with all the other stuff? The problem with Islam, though, is Islam fundamentally rejects both our belief system and the overwhelming majority of the Christian belief system. And their cop-out is, well, we believe Jesus is a prophet, which from a theological standpoint is a bit of a misnomer, but on a political standpoint, of the top 10 most dangerous countries, you could fact check me, of the top 10 most dangerous countries to be a Christian in, all of them, with the exception of North Korea, are Muslim majority countries. There's only one country in the Middle East where the rate of population of Christians are actually growing, and that's, of course, the state of Israel. Everywhere else, it is shrinking. And in places like Iraq, I mean, talk about ethnic cleansing. That really is an ethnic cleansing. Places like Lebanon, I mean, Lebanon used to be majority Christian. Now it's what,
Right.
10%, 15%, and shrinking
All
up.
of them did. Iran was Zoroastrian, Egypt was Coptic. Yeah, all across the board in the Levant. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, well, is there anything else that you wanted to maybe throw in? Any mentions of articles, books, or any points? Any finishing thoughts that you had?
I'll make a general point, assuming that your audience is majority American Jew, which is to say that the American Jewish community has a particular vested interest in discussing and amplifying stories and policies pertaining to anti-Semitism, which makes sense because why wouldn't you? Having said that, though, the overwhelming majority of the American people do not care. And that is not a slight on the majority of the American people. That's simply a recognition of the reality that the majority of the American people don't know Jews. And the majority of the American people don't think about Israel. They just don't. And that's totally fine. And why should they? And I'll say another perhaps cynical view, but it's kind of true. When it comes to the hostages, the former Jewish hostages who are stuck in Gaza, the American people are not going to care about people whose names they can't pronounce. They'll care about Omer Nutra and Hirsch Goldberg Poland and Keith Siegel because those are pronounceable names of Americans who grew up, playing basketball at the local Y. And I think one of the greatest mistakes since October 7th that the American Jewish community perpetrated is by creating a division between Jewish Americans and the American people. And that's not true. I'm just as American as anybody else. I'm also Jewish, and I'm very proud of that
Right.
fact. That's a core part of my identity. But don't treat me better or different because I'm also Jewish. Treat me the same because I'm an American. So
Right.
fundamentally, our litigation against Harvard was not about special treatment. It was about equal treatment. And I was very upset when the images were being shown of Idan Alexander, the last American hostage to be released from Hamas captivity. When he was released, the JCC of the Palisades, which is where Idan would play basketball. Ironically, that's where I went to summer camp back in the day in Bergen County. They invited thousands of people to watch on these jumbotrons of Idan being released in Gaza, then him being put on some Israeli helicopter, then him landing in Israel proper, going to the hospital. It was very exciting. It was very jubilant. And they were all watching early in the morning on these jumbotrons, and they were all waving exclusively Israeli flags. And I thought you guys are totally missing the point. And you know who the first people to pick up on that was? Nick Fuentes and Glenn Greenwald and Megyn Kelly. And they were the ones to say, well, hang on, I thought this was an American issue. And it is an American issue. This is an American boy. And I think we do ourselves a tremendous disservice by creating these imaginary divisions, by saying that American Jews are somehow different or separate from the rest of the American people. We're not. We're just as American as anybody else. And so when we focus exclusively on anti-Semitism, I actually think it does us a tremendous disservice. Anti-Semitism is a manifestation of a much greater societal ill, which is the demoralization of young people, which is young people not feeling that they have a role in society because they listen to people like Nick Fuentes and others who accurately diagnose problems, right? It's a tough economy. You can't afford things. You have difficulty, maintaining relationships with women. And so they'll accurately diagnose problems, but they'll provide terrible answers. And those answers are, yes, because of the Jews. Yes, because of AIPAC.
Right.
I mean, going back to the first question you asked about why is everyone obsessed with AIPAC? It's because all these people only talk about AIPAC and the Israel lobby. And young people are starting to believe that. They're starting to buy into that. And so if we just focus on anti-Semitism, that's not the root cause. It's a symptom. It's the water dripping in to my building, but it's not the actual hole in the roof. And that's what we need to address,
Right.
the hole in the roof. Because if you can address the hole in the roof, then you won't have to worry about the water dripping in so much because there won't be any water dripping into your apartment. So I would just caution us, stop just focusing on anti-Semitism in a vacuum. Again, focus on anti-Semitism, but in the context of religious persecution in the United States, whether that's targeting Mormons or Catholics or anyone, and in the context of young people need hope. They need a vision. They need purpose. And if they don't have that thing, just like societies before, they will delve into grandiose conspiracies and start blaming the easiest targets. In this case, it's Jews. That would be my closing message.
Diagnose the issue. Don't forget. Don't stop putting band-aids on the wound. Take care of it. Fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
As
couldn't agree
as
more.
Charlie Kirk always said, go to church, get married, have kids, build a legacy. Jews, we're so in sync with that. I mean, we should
Right.
be the ones carrying on Charlie's legacy and Charlie's message, not just talking about anti-Semitism, but talking about Jewish wisdom and Jewish values. We have so much to offer the world. Young people they need to hear those things. They need to read Charlie's book about keeping Shabbat and turning off your phone
All right.
and being with your family and being part of a community. We Jews know exactly what that's like. So let's tell the world instead of defining ourselves by our ideological adversaries.
That's fair. The thing about us is we love to pioneer ideas. We like to challenge the status quo. We've just always been such academic people, scholastic people that we're always challenging what is currently working. And sometimes our idea is phenomenal, and sometimes our idea is a total disaster. And unfortunately, I think that we have too many people in the ultra left, people, really pushing the whole trans movement. We do, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I think we have too many people that have, some position of influence in these spaces. And I think it's terrible for society, no matter which country you live in. I don't believe in God forbid killing them or persecuting them, but the idea that we're putting them on pedestals and we're changing genders for children, like these are morality issues. These are issues that destroy societies, and unfortunately, some of us do play a part in that. I think it's like we also have to. I think we have to be accountable for those things too, because with great power comes great responsibility. Like this is what I think. I think God gave us the ability to make major changes, which we've done throughout history. And I think the vast majority of us make amazing positive changes, but we got some bad apples.
Yes, to be clear, we are not condoning violence or physical harm in any way, shape, or form, but suggesting rather that we need
Absolutely
to be
not.
careful about the individuals we're platforming. I would agree with you on that.
Absolutely not. I hope that was clear. Absolutely not.
Just making sure.
Absolutely not. Okay, ladies and gents, thank you for making it to the end of this episode. This has been phenomenal conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, Chavez.
Yeah, and listen, Rafi, when I inevitably, like every American Jew, move to South Florida, you are my realtor. So thank you very much.
Phenomenal, man. Phenomenal. I can't wait, man. This is like if all goes to shit, South Florida is like the last stand. It really is, man. It's crazy.
Amen.
It's like
True.
I'm glad I moved here a year before COVID. It's been a blessing, dude.
Wow.
It went from Hell's living room, or not Hell's living room. What do they call it?
God's waiting room.
God's waiting room. I can't. Okay, I got it. But it really went from a retirement home to this vibrant young state. It's something else. Guys, subscribe, like, and share. Follow Shabbos Kestenbaum on all social media accounts. And it has been a pleasure and a wrap, and we will see you on the next one. Peace.